The house everyone in my family called a worthless old shack was about to become the center of an $80 million secret. But the strangest part wasn't the money. It was what the lawyer said next. Your father knew this day would come. And he left the entire property to the one person in this family who never asked him for anything. That person was me. My name is Emily Carter. And for most of my life, I watched people underestimate my father. His name was Daniel Carter. He wasn't a businessman. He didn't drive an expensive car. He didn't wear designer clothes. He repaired farm equipment for a living and lived in the same old farmhouse for more than 40 years. The paint was peeling. The porch was crooked. The windows were old. And every time it rained, we had to put buckets under the ceiling. But my father loved that house. He always told me the same thing. Emily, your mother loved this place. My mother had died when I was young. So I never questioned him. To me, that old house wasn't ugly. It was home. But my older brother Jason saw it differently. Jason had become successful. He drove a luxury SUV, wore expensive watches, and lived in a beautiful suburban mansion. His wife, Lauren, was even more obsessed with appearances. The first time she visited my father's house, she stood on the porch and laughed. Emily, you actually still live here. I smiled. It's Dad's house. She looked at the peeling paint. The place is falling apart. My father heard her. He didn't say anything. He simply continued drinking his coffee. Jason eventually walked into the kitchen and placed some papers on the table. Dad, we need to talk. My father looked at him. About what? The house. Jason explained that someone had offered $300,000 for the property. That's good money, Dad. My father shook his head. No. Jason frowned. Why not? Because I'm not selling. Jason became frustrated. Dad, you're getting older. You can't maintain this place forever. My father looked at him calmly. I don't need to. Jason laughed. You're being stubborn. My father smiled. No, I'm protecting something. None of us understood what he meant. Then, 6 months later, my father died peacefully in his sleep. He was 64 years old. His death broke me. For days, I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. His old boots were still beside the door. His coffee mug was still on the kitchen counter. His brown jacket was still hanging behind his bedroom door. Every room reminded me of him. But 3 days after the funeral, Jason called me. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask whether I had eaten. He didn't even say he missed Dad. His first words were, "We need to discuss the property." I couldn't believe him. Jason, Dad hasn't even been buried properly in my heart. He sighed. Emily, we have to be realistic. That was the moment I realized something. My brother wasn't grieving. He was calculating. A few days later, Jason came to the house with Lauren. They started discussing how quickly they could sell it. I finally snapped. Dad just died. Jason looked at me. And? I stared at him. And you're already trying to sell his home? He shrugged. It's just a house. Those 4 words hurt more than anything. It wasn't just a house to Dad. Jason rolled his eyes. Fine. Whatever. Then he said something I'll never forget. You always cared too much about this old place. I answered quietly. Maybe because I cared about him. Jason said nothing. Then, 3 days later, a black sedan stopped outside the farmhouse. An older man stepped out carrying a leather briefcase. He introduced himself. Robert Hayes. I asked him who he was. He smiled. I was your father's attorney. Jason suddenly appeared behind me. He immediately asked, Are you here about the sale? Robert looked confused. Sale? Jason nodded. We're selling the property. Robert slowly smiled. No, you're not. Jason frowned. What do you mean? Robert walked into the house. He placed his briefcase on the old kitchen table. Then he opened it. Inside were dozens of documents. Property records. Maps. Contracts. Old legal papers. Robert spread a large map across the table. This property was purchased by your father 42 years ago. Jason laughed. Everyone knows that. Robert looked at him. No. You don't know what he purchased. He pointed to the map. This isn't just a farmhouse. This land includes development rights connected to the entire valley. Jason stopped smiling. I stared at Robert. What does that mean? He looked at me. It means this property is worth considerably more than $300,000. I asked him, how much? He took a breath. Approximately $80 million. Silence. Complete silence. Jason stared at him. Lauren covered her mouth. I couldn't speak. $80 million. For the old house everyone had laughed at. Jason finally laughed nervously. That can't be right. Robert calmly opened another folder. It is. He explained that decades earlier, my father had purchased several strategic parcels of land before a major development project was announced. Over the years, the surrounding area had grown. New roads were built. Businesses arrived. Property values exploded. And because of zoning changes and development rights, my father's land became one of the most valuable pieces of property in the entire region. Jason looked at me. You knew about this? I shook my head. No. I had no idea. Robert looked at me. Your father made sure you didn't. Then he pulled out another envelope. This is his final will. Jason immediately smiled. At least we'll divide the property equally. Robert looked at him. No. Jason's smile disappeared. Robert opened the document. Your father left his other financial assets equally between his children. Jason nodded. Good. But the farmhouse and surrounding property were left entirely to Emily. Jason froze. What? I stared at Robert. Me. He nodded. Yes. Jason suddenly became furious. That isn't fair. Robert remained calm. Your father wasn't required to make it fair. He was required to make it legal. Then he handed me a letter. This was written specifically for you. My hands started shaking. I opened it. The first line said, My sweet Emily. I immediately began crying. The letter continued. If you're reading this, your brother probably wants to sell the house. I laughed through my tears. That was my father. Even after he was gone, he still knew us. The letter continued. Emily, I kept this secret because I wanted you to grow up believing that a person's worth has nothing to do with money. You watched me work. You watched me struggle. You never complained. You never asked me for expensive things. You only asked me one thing. That I come home safely. I couldn't stop crying. Then came the sentence that changed everything. If this property ever becomes valuable, don't think of it as your fortune. Think of it as your freedom. I looked up. My father had spent his entire life teaching me that money wasn't the goal. It was only a tool. Jason didn't understand that. He wanted to sell everything immediately. He begged me to accept the $80 million offer. Emily, think about it. That's life-changing money. I looked at him. What would you do with it? He smiled. Buy a mansion. I smiled sadly. That's exactly why Dad left it to me. Jason became angry. But I didn't argue. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to protect my father's legacy. So I rejected the offer. Instead, I created the Daniel Carter Family Foundation. We kept the farmhouse. We restored it. And we used the property's income to help families who couldn't afford homes. The same old house everyone had laughed at became a place where struggling families could find hope. Months later, Jason came back. He stood on the porch. He looked different. Quieter. He looked at the restored house and said, I was wrong. I asked him, about what? He looked around. I thought Dad was protecting a house. But he was protecting something much bigger. I smiled. What? Jason looked at me. His values. For the first time in years, my brother understood our father. Before he left, he asked me one question. Do you think Dad would be proud? I looked at the house. Then I looked at the old pickup truck sitting beneath the oak tree. And I smiled. Yes. He would. People still ask me what my father left me. I could tell them. $80 million. A valuable property. Financial security. A foundation. But that isn't what I inherited. I inherited his patience. His kindness. His dignity. And his belief that your worth isn't determined by what you own. Because sometimes, the people living in the smallest houses are carrying the biggest hearts. And sometimes the family members who laugh at what you have don't realize they're standing beside something priceless. My father's house wasn't worthless. It never was. Its true value was never measured in dollars. It was measured in memories, in love, in sacrifice, and in the lesson my father left behind. Never judge someone's worth by the house they live in. Because you never know what kind of treasure is hidden behind an old door.